Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're gonna be reviewing the album's second album by the band Curved Air.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So in a wholly unrelated side note to everything that I'm gonna be talking about in this video, I just wanna let you all know that today was a very wintry day. Now I know that a lot of my viewers are from the US or from England or even Canada or wherever, but here winter starts a bit later on, and when I say winter I don't mean it's snowing outside right now. It was just raining cats and dogs most of the day, and well, when I started the series this was the usual weather, and we've went through an entire spring, then summer, and then fall to come back to this point yet again, which to me at least symbolizes the long journey we've been through since January 1st, 2022, and I'm just really excited about it. But anyway, that's enough of my blabbering. Here are some of my favorite bits from this album. So coming back into this band just one last time for this year, some people would say that with this one I am finished with the classic era of Curved Air's albums, but some would also argue that maybe their fourth album is also a part of their classics. But if there's one uncontested truth, it's the fact that whatever they released after the year of 1973, and of course when they reunited in the 2000s, is absolute garbage and not as well received as their earlier albums. Okay, maybe I'm being a bit too rough, but yeah, anyway, what are we reviewing today? Well, today we're coming back to this band Curved Air for the third and final time, reviewing now their second studio album, which is called, wait for it, Second Album. And this album was released in the year of 1971, just 1 year after the release of their debut, and mostly it features the exact same cast of members other than the bass player, who used to be Robert Martin, but after he went through a hand injury they replaced him with Ian Iyer, which himself would be replaced once again in the next album by Curved Air. Now for those of you who have stuck around for a while now, you might remember that my first reception of this band was with their debut album, which was a pretty fine album crippled by a bunch by its really bad mixing and mastering. Yes, it sounds like shit. I hate it so much. The songs are good, but the mixing, mastering, production, engineering, whatever you might call it, is just so bad. But when we moved on to Phantasmagoria, their third studio album, it seems like that issue was fixed, and well, I really thought that that was an excellent album. So my own personal narrative with this band started off as me disliking Curved Air and then being exposed to Phantasmagoria and really liking this band, and well, after listening to today's album I kind of started getting why again I didn't really like this band so much. Now for those of you who are unfamiliar with the sound of Curved Air, I would have to say that there are two main members in the band which are responsible for why their sound is so freaking unique. Of course, the first one is their vocalist called Sonia Christina. Christina's voice is hauntingly beautiful, and I use the word hauntingly on purpose because that's exactly what it does. I would pair her sound much like with that of Anna Meek from Caterpillar, or even I'd have to say Barbara Gaskin from Henry Cow as well, singing in a tone that is both reminiscent of the beauty that you'd expect from a female vocalist, but as well as having something deeply, almost unsettling about her her voice, and I tend to find that on the Curved Air albums she utilizes it in various ways which often give a very floaty and psychedelic experience. Now the second person is actually Daryl Wire. Now Daryl Wire is a violinist basically. He also plays the piano on here, but the violin is his main instrument, which is the very unique sound that he puts on with Curved Air. Now to be specific, he doesn't actually play a regular violin, but he plays the electric violin, which does have its own unique timbre, and honestly it really sets their own sound apart from many other bands that utilize a violin, and I can't quite pinpoint why that really is. Now honestly, after going through their first 3 albums, I can definitely say that their sound is like nothing that I know of, but if you really pushed me to it, I think that I would compare them as being the unholy child of maybe the combination of Cressida, Renaissance, and Spirogura together. Now, as I said before, this album did experience some setbacks with me, well, mainly because of its production quality. Yes, it just reminded me of how bad the production quality was on the first album, which again had some pretty interesting ideas and tracks on it, just mixed awfully. And while this one might be a bit better, I still do find that it's pretty horrendous to listen to at times. Now I know that there is a remastered version of this album that I can go ahead and listen to, but honestly I don't think that it will be that much better. I specifically remember when I listened to Curved Air's first album, Air Conditioning, I went on ahead and listened to the remastered version, and well, it still sounded pretty bad. So take for examples the 2 tracks from this album, Everdance and Bright Summer Day 68. These 2 are fine tunes. I really think that they're good, but the vocals by Christina are so freaking bloated. They're unhomogenized with the rest of the ensemble, and I have no idea how can anyone really call this being a good piece of music when it's really such a dissonance between the 2 parts of the band. Honestly, if the mixing was done right on here, I would have not been taken out of the mood for this one and would listen to these 2 songs and the rest of this album for the sake of it really gladly. Now, from everything that I read about this album and the one prior to it, this is not a case of 2 albums which were produced around the same time, so they had the same mixing issues. No, these 2 were actually recorded with a year's gap in between them, and the reason why it happened, well, I really don't know. It might have been a mistake, but it also might have not been a mistake. This might have been a real conscious decision to do it like this. Now, that is not to say that the reason why I didn't like some of this album was only because of its mixing. I do think that it has its own faults, and some of it has to do with the way that it is being composed and written. This album was written by Francis Monkman and Daryl Wire. Now, note that I didn't say co-written, I said written because they wrote it separately. Yes, they split up the composing efforts between the 2, with Daryl Wire taking the first half of the album and Monkman taking the second one. And while they both just knew that they didn't really have the same creative visions as one another and they wanted each one to have their own go at writing songs for Curved Air, it still ultimately probably was one of the reasons which led Curved Air to break up just a year afterwards in 1972. Now, while Wire did actually collaborate a bit in order to write the first side, giving the lyrics duties to no other than Sonia Christina herself, Monkman decided that he wanted to take the entirety of the side 2 of this album, and especially he put it because he wanted his own vision to get across, with especially the last song called Peace of Mind, which he considered to be his own unique epic. Now personally, I don't agree with this classification of calling this last track of almost 13 minutes long an epic. It really doesn't resonate the same ideas that I expect with an epic in prog terms. And yes, we have seen already a Curved Air epic per se, but technically chronologically we didn't. But in the album Phantasmagoria, we have the coupling of Whose Shoulder You're Looking Over Anyway and Over and Above, that both of them make for this one really long track. But honestly, they're not an epic. They're more like a journey you're going through in psychedelic floaty sound, and not really a journey of heavy key points and motifs and ideas just floating around in such an epic manner. Now, that is not to say that this album made for a suffering listen. Definitely not. The first track on this album, called Young Mother, is everything that I need from Curved Air ever. It's such a good track. I listened to it multiple times, and I listened to this album for the first time like 3 hours ago. So take it as what it is. And while I do think that it's a great track, it does not surpass my favorite from their discography quite yet, which is not quite the same from Phantasmagoria. And of course, how can I move on without mentioning what is probably the biggest hit that Curved Air has ever seen, and that's of course their track Backstreet Love. Yeah, this song is a pretty cool song and it sounds really good, and I definitely see why it is such a big hit because it's so fun to listen to and it's easily accessible. And yeah, you know, a good track, not that progressive, but still cool enough. And yeah, that's really my opinions of this album by Curved Air. I think that second album is a cool second album all in all, but if I had to place it in the rankings, I'd say that it's not as good as Phantasmagoria is. But alas, this is the last time we are reviewing Curved Air, at least for this year, and who knows, maybe next year we'll come back to them. I definitely want to get to know their fourth album, Aircut, because I do think that it's going to be an interesting ride. But for now, I think we can move on from this to talk about this album's cover. So unlike the last album by Curved Air, this one actually does have an album cover, and if you're confused by that, yes, last album Air Conditioning didn't actually have a cover. It had a transparent cover and only a drawing in the middle of the record. Very interesting stuff, not really my thing. But this one is also a cool one, and it does somewhat challenge the idea of what is a normal album cover and how it's supposed to behave. And this one of course features on its cover this beige tone which has a very interesting mild rainbow on it. Now the rainbow is actually intentional. It's a reference to the place where the band got its name, which is the 1969 Terry Riley album called A Rainbow in Curved Air. Now of course, as I said, this one does play with the usual format of how an album cover should look. So if you're thinking about the vinyl version of this one, you'd actually see that the rainbow is not just the drawing, but it's a cutout. When you open it up, you can see the entire picture, or what you might ever call it. I really wanted to have some visual to show you, but I couldn't find any online. It was pretty hard for me to comprehend it as well, but just take my word for it. But all in all, I really like this cover. I think it's simple. I think it fits with the overall theme of how you'd expect a Curved Air album cover to look like, and while it's not as interesting, grandiose in a way like Phantasmagoria, which is not that great of a cover, I still think that it makes for an interesting pick. So yeah, this album all in all is a pretty fine album, of course being crippled by poor sound design, and I think that I have to give it a rating of about 7 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Omadon by Mike Oldfield. I'm very excited for it. If there's one album that might have been able to rival Tubular Bells, it will be this one, so I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, of course I want to thank my lovely supporters over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Wall and Rest of Kings and Lindsay Haycox. You guys are just the best, and if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my about page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.